to the Warzone Amateur Hour podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Warzone Amateur Hour podcast, episode number 57, our second having dropped in, fully immersed ourselves in the world of Warzone The Pacific and Caldera. As you heard last week, for all our loyal listeners, it was a bit overwhelming for us, but now I think we've got some sun on our skin. The burns have worn off a little bit. We've got our sea legs under us, and now we can take a bit deeper dive into what's going on and what it means for all of us. But before we get into that, as always, I am turning to my co-host, the valiant, the very lethal this week, 10InchCowboy, to ask him, how was your week in the Warzone, 10InchCowboy?
Wow, thank you for that really nice introduction. This week was a lot better than last week. I think I'm starting to acclimate to the new, I guess you could say, environment. In the new jungly environment. Playing quite a bit of Caldera this week, way more than I expected. The old ball and chain's out of town, so I've been playing a lot. I hope she's not listening, but other than that, I've been playing a lot. It's been going well, playing more than I should, and getting some victories, actually, all of a sudden, including some clutches, which have been unexpected and good. How was your week in the Warzone? I know you got to play a little bit.
Yeah, my week, last week in the Warzone, almost non-existent, only hopping into, enough games I could count on a single hand. This week, though, really diving in, trying out the various modes, getting my handle on a lot of these guns, especially, the meta, so to speak, as it was now. But let's turn it back to you. Highlight week for the 10InchCowboy in the Warzone. Yes, clutching out victories solo, and not just like, got the final kill, like, the team dead, watching him make his way through the final circle, navigating this, on the edge of doom, and then pulling it out. And I think, did you have a personal record this week in terms of, big map, we should call it, Battle Royale kill totals? I believe you had 9. Is that a personal record for you, Cowboy?
I think in the big map, either Vanguard or the previous iteration, now I'm forgetting, whatever map, whether it was
Verdansk,
Vanguard, Verdansk, very similar words, whether it was Verdansk or whether it was Caldera. Yeah, I think 9. I think I've had 9 before, but 9 is a personal best, I believe. I don't think I've ever cracked the double digit on a big map in a real game, but I did have 9 kills and a victory. That victory was shared, though, with somebody else in a duos, I believe. Or it was a trios, and I believe you left, actually. You left early, and my partner and I continued on, and we ended up getting the victory, and I had 9 kills. But I did have a clutch, one of the only clutches. I mean, I can count my clutches on one hand, that's for sure. This one was with Pole and this Doug. I don't know his full name. I can't remember. Doug Jitsu, I think it is. Well, we played him with Doug. And yeah, I pulled it out by myself. That was one of the more, man, it was just incredible. It's kind of why you play the game, like for every reason you play, entertainment, killing time, just the pure adrenaline rush of a sweet victory. I mean, that's at the top of the list. And yeah, I had a great clutch, which felt fantastic. So, it was a good week. One of my better weeks. And starting to I think, if I'm reflecting back from this point in time, looking back a week or 2 weeks ago when Caldera was new and fresh, I was scared. I didn't know what guns to use. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who I was. I was lost. It was a very, like an existential crisis situation for the old cowboy. Like a cowboy on a ship, just not in his element, And I feel like now I'm starting to understand what I need. I know what guns are working, what ground loot to pick up, what to ditch, what to hang on to, what to throw at people, what to throw back at people. And it's been going a lot better, starting to dig into the comfortability, you could say. So yes, it's been a good week.
Wow, sounds like really, discovering yourself like a teenage boy here, going through puberty, finding what works and what doesn't. Now, this kind of tees up a topic which I hadn't really prepared, but I certainly want to explore, and because it seems like I can't wrap my head around it. Honestly, it's the opposite of what I expected, but it really seems like Warzone in its current iteration, everyone, even in our Discord, has been reflecting the same, as like our KDs of, the amateurs collectively seem to be going up. And I certainly know my KD on the current Caldera is well beyond what it was on Verdansk. And I don't understand what's different, but even today I had a 10 kill duos win, and
what?
It was insane. What? And I haven't had that kind of luck, and it's just something's going on. I know obviously the player base isn't vastly different. It's got to be the same players for the most part, but just something has shifted, and I can't really figure it out. Do you have any theories about what's going on here?
Well, yeah, I do have a theory. I think that what's happening, a lot of people stepped away from Warzone over the summer, late summer, early fall. They got sick of the game because it was very hard to play unless you were putting in the time, leveling up the weapons, keeping your tools sharp, as I like to say. If you weren't keeping those tools sharp whenever you drop into Warzone, it was not fun. Even for us, the people that play all the time, there were times where it was frustrating and you didn't want to play. So a lot of people, I think, stepped away from the game. Fast forward, early December, new map comes out, right? They're coming back, right? They're coming back and they're playing. And as we were confused and scared and lost in the beginning, as are these return customers. They're coming back, playing the game. They're not having a good time. These are the people I think that you're preying upon. I think that the player pool has grown a little bit with the new map. People are coming back, exploring it, seeing how it goes. And for the time being, because you play a good amount, you're an above average, I would say, time input player. You know what I mean? You're growing quicker because your tools are sharp, as opposed to these little Timmies that are hopping on just to see what Caldera is all about. So you're dropping in and you're slaughtering these fools and your KD's going up. But I think that over the next month or two or three, as the excitement wears down and people settle into the new map, you will go back to getting slaughtered and just torn apart and not having good games. And I think it's going to happen more and more frequently as this newer player base hops back out.
Interesting. So the theory there is that the player base has grown. The old dormant bot, collective have made their way back to the game. And we're benefiting from it. I certainly think that's possible. It's also, we should note it is the holiday season, so maybe that we get an influx of casuals, so to speak, or players that don't typically play the game because they have a bit more time. There's also, a lot of consoles were likely gifted over these past few weeks, and, maybe players hopping on for the first time. I don't know. I'm wondering if there's some data to back up any of this theorizing, but I certainly welcome it, because if Caldera was as sweaty as, Verdansk was, and it was mimicking that type of experience, which, some games it can, but I would be very sad. I was kind of in that place last week, much more refreshed and invigorated this week, thanks to, these players I'm picking off. I think a lot of it, too, is just the nature of the map. It is a much less straightforward map. There's so much, there's so much 360 degree nature of where you're vulnerable, whereas so much on Verdansk, you could kind of put yourself into corners, so to speak, and really keep the enemies in front of you, keep yourself safe, whereas now it's just a different beast. So much of it, too, is running uphill or downhill or traversing large spans of vast open space. So
positioning is so important. As we talked about last week, I get most of the times that I'm getting killed are from above or below, and I mostly you know what I mean? It's where you're positioned, how you're playing, the elevation change is a big part of the battle on this map, and maybe you instinctively have that bone in your body, and because you've been playing so much.
It's an interesting thought. And, speaking of the foliage and all of that, I think that kind of touches on a first tip or certain thing I've discovered, and I know was echoed by people who have tweeted at us and emailed, is that, a perk that we all loved when it first came out recently, and then I think a lot of us moved away, myself included, it was the Combat Scout, which I think now more than ever for that third perk, it's really valuable to get that in there because as we've talked about, like so much of the engagements, I think 90% I would say are from a distance on Caldera, and you need your teammates a lot of time to help finish guys off. And so having that automatic ping on the guys with that combat recon or combat scout, perk, I think is imperative. And on the flip side, to help counter that, I've gone back to using cold-blooded as my perk slot 1. Do you agree with that? Are you running those perks yourself?
Yeah, I never stepped away from Combat Scout. What were you using instead?
I had gone back to Amped. That was when we were full bore.
Loser, why would you do that?
Because we were on our full bore Rebirth Sweat loadout where I'm swapping between the AR and SMG like it's, bonkers, like I'm juiced out on crack. And now I've scaled that back again. Like, ironically enough, I think SMGs are almost kind of like obsolete, so to, in many ways on on Caldera. I think you can really get away with like just having long to medium range weapons with the way that the engagements happens. Like, how many times are you fighting someone indoors on Caldera? Not that often, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's obviously we'll cover this, but it's no question that the AR and LMG trains are the trains you want to be riding right now. The shotguns, the snipers, most of the SMGs, they're just not in the rocket launchers. They are absolutely atrocious. I don't even want to talk about the rocket launchers. A long love, affair that I've had with launchers over this last year plus playing this game has now been completely destroyed with Vanguard. The rocket launchers are so bad, I don't even want to get into them. For some reason, I've point blank shot people. I swear these rockets hit them in the chest. It doesn't even register, not even downing them, but that's another conversation for another day. But yeah, obviously the ARs, the LMGs are where it's at right now. All of what you want to call the metas, the best weapons are there. They're not, I mean, there's basically one SMG that I think is super viable. That's the MP40, but I'm sure we're going to get into more weapons talk a little later on in the pod.
Yeah, well, so circling back to your perks, what kind of are you running there? Let's get the layout here for the Cowboys perk decisions.
Perks is in not because now we have 2 perks on the guns with the 10 attachments.
Yeah,
You're not talking about attachment
purely
perk?
the perk slot 1, 2, 3 as we touched on. You're running Combat Scout. You're not.
I'm running combat going from we'll go from the 3rd, 2nd, and then 1st. I'm running Combat Scout, and then I'm depending. Obviously, it's either Ghost or Overkill, depending on what. Depending on the loadout, depending on what the situation is. I right now don't have a leveled up AR or LMG that I'm comfortable using. I still haven't unlocked the Bren. I think it's level 53 on the Battle Pass. I'm like at level 48 or 9. I'm almost there, but I haven't unlocked the Bren, which is pretty much the hog. So I'm really running an SMG, which is the MP40 that I do have fully loaded up, and I'm running that as a ghost class. And typically when I'm playing with a couple of the individuals we like to play with, they'll drop an LMG or an AR for me. But I did actually just kind of kit out a STG, I think it is. So that's kind of like the only thing that I have rocking right now is an STG, which I'm not a huge fan of. Don't judge me. The STG is a decent weapon. It's a fairly good ground loot weapon actually too. If you can't get your hands on a Bren. But so I'm not running I typically run Overkill, but right now I'm actually realizing I'm running more Ghost if we're playing on the big map. So I'm going Combat Scout, I'm going Ghost, and then I'm going, I think, is it Double Time I run? What's the other perk one? I can't remember if it's Double Time or if I'm running something different.
Well, as I said, I recommend Cold-Blooded because that makes you immune to the effects of Combat Scout. So if an enemy shoots you, you do not get that ping if you're running Cold-Blooded. But yeah, I think Double Time's really the other fan favorite there.
I gotta double check. I feel like I'm running Double Time, but I could be running Cold-Blooded. If I'm not running Cold-Blooded, I'll probably switch to Cold-Blooded.
Recommend that. Amateur tip of the week. As you said, The weapon selection, interesting. Us amateurs that don't have Vanguard are finding ourselves clawing through this arsenal, unlocking it slowly, painfully slowly, one gun at a time. For the most part, relying on ground loot. I'm very much the same. A lot of times when I'm running this Vanguard Royale and I get the first loadout, I'll just go Ghost because most of the time the ground loot weapons are better than what I have in my loadout. However, that's changing, I guess, by the game as I'm starting to finally get the two weapons I've decided on are going to be like my main hogs here, which is, as you said, the MP40, kind of like the SMG of choice.
So solid SMG.
Solid SMG. And a lot of great options on the ground loot one for that as well. But I myself, before I reveal what the primary really is of choice, let's just dive into weapons here. Over the first week or two of the game, they really made an effort to get this weapon balancing under control right off the bat as they integrated, whatever it was, 40 or 30 plus new Vanguard weapons here into the world of Warzone. And I know initially one of the things they did is they nerfed the EM2, they nerfed the AK-47, both Black Ops, standard bears there in the AR realm. They finally nerfed the OTS-9 slightly. The Car 98 and the Swiss had their flinch massively increased finally, which I as somebody, I love the car, and I know you certainly do, but I was very glad to see them adding that flinch nerf. How have you felt about that?
I just, what I don't get, and I mean, it is what it is, and we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, the snipers in Vanguard are horrible. The long range weapon, your snipers, your marksman rifles are terrible. And the car and the Swiss, obviously you can only use in certain game modes, but those are still go-to snipers. I don't know what the move is here. I don't know why they would nerf those and then not have any other options. Like, there's clearly other AR and LMG options in the new Vanguard realm that you can use to substitute for these nerfs that came to ARs and LMGs of past. So I don't know what they're doing there. And yeah, I have a soft spot for the car. It's my go-to long-range weapon, and them nerfing it sucks for me. I'm a creature of comfort, or comfort, the saying. And now I'm getting just bucked out of my little comfort zone. So I'm not too excited about that. But I guess it is what it is. While I'm talking about sniper rifles in Vanguard, does anybody else feel like they're just not registering shots at times? I swear I'm shooting these new snipers and I'm hitting it, and I'm not just talking headshots, body shots. It's not even registering it as a hit sometimes. It's so bizarre to me. Have you noticed that at all?
Are you speaking specifically about Vanguard snipers or just snipers across the board with the new Warzone The Pacific?
Specifically Vanguard snipers. Specifically new sniper rifles introduced to the game. They're not registered. I mean, the car and the Swiss are registering the way that they always have. These new ones, like, don't register shots. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm curious to see if anyone else feels the same way. But I swear I've hit just body shots, and they don't even register. So I'm upset that they're nerfing these as well as introducing shit snipers. Well, but we can move on from that.
I certainly will, testify to the fact that, yeah, the Vanguard snipers are garbage. Obviously don't have any in my loadout, but the ones I've played with off of ground loot, I think I got one kill, and it was because I hit the guy like 3 fucking times or something. Although I do have a feeling that the Car 98 Vanguard could be all right if you have it level it up. It feels a little similar to the Modern Warfare, but again, I don't know like how they're trying to differentiate and distinguish one from the other. It's so stupid to me that there's 2 iterations of the same weapon. But that said, I don't think these Car 98 Swiss nerfs like really affected you or us as amateurs, because what they did is they increased flinch, which I think really affected like the more sweat lords, quick scoping punks, which I encountered all the time. Like, you'd be shooting the sniper, you'd crack them, you'd waiting for them to peek one time to get your final shot, but they're able to just peek and be getting absorbing fucking bullets like they're the Terminator made out of liquid. And then they just crack off that headshot because they had no flinch. Now that's not possible. Now when they're peeking through the scope and they're taking gunshots into their gullet, they're going to be shaking around a little. So I don't know if like you should be that bummed on these nerfs. I personally am like standing up and cheering for them. So
Okay. Well, yeah, maybe I need to play a little bit more and see how they affect me.
But then the other thing that we had touched on way, way back when Vanguard was first introduced is the fact that there was this thing called bloom when it came to essentially recoil, and that was that vast majority of weapons, not all, had kind of like a cone in which you could be aiming down the sights completely stationary, firing at one area semi-automatic, and each shot would kind of veer, like have a standard deviation almost of where it would veer off. Well, the community hated that, especially when it came to Warzone. It really was crippling the Vanguard guns out of the gate. So what happened during these weapons tuning patches is bloom was being essentially, they said, completely removed from Vanguard guns, and it was kind of going to be like a slow pace, not all over one patch. I'm not sure if that's been completely phased out, but that was certainly like they tried something. They're like, okay, guys, we're gonna fucking lay off that. So any thoughts on that?
No, I don't. Wait, can you explain what bloom is again? Because I don't know if I followed that.
So okay, let me get in your mind's eye. All right, you have your AR lined up at a spot.
Yes.
You pull the trigger 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and each time your crosshair is aimed at the exact same spot. Well, with bloom, the actual pathway of the bullet is kind of going to veer off an inch to the left, an inch to the right.
Almost I remember.
Like,
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, now I understand. Yeah, we've had this conversation before about if we thought that would be good or not. So it sounds like they're over and they're completely eliminating it.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense. Like, to me, and again, I can't get too started on it. I'm going to get too upset. To me, like, I think the only way really to make these weapons work, having like, Vanguard versus Modern Warfare versus Black Ops, is like there has to be kind of some foundational elements that, they're the same about them. And having one weapon class that has bloom and the other two doesn't, to me, like that doesn't gel. And that kind of touches on the whole fucking idea about this 10 attachment thing that, again, is the stupidest thing they've done to Warzone. I fucking hate it. And I think the 5 attachment, you have to pick 5. I think that was brilliant. One of the best parts about Warzone. But again, can't go down that rabbit hole, but I think that's so fucking stupid. Activision, get that out of here. Never do that shit again.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that's something that they're going to fix or change. We're stuck with the old 10 attachment situation.
So that said, it seemed like right out of the gate, the Vanguard guns were a little weak. Then they did a few weapons tuning. Then it got like out of whack where the automaton was like insanely broken. And then the Cooper carbine, I think, was right up there. But now I would say...
Well, no. The MG42 was the one that was fully broken. That was the laser beam with absolutely zero recoil.
You're right. That I didn't even get a chance to try that. I saw clips, especially when people were... Oh, no, that's right. It would look like they were mounted, but they weren't because it was such minimal recoil.
I remember, because you like instinctively are... when you shoot something, no matter what it is, you kind of are actively fighting the recoil, like subconsciously, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of pulling down or, you're anticipating a drift. And it's just subconscious. When I remember I shot the MG42 that was leveled, and I was like pulling down on the trigger stick, expecting it to rise. And it was like I was even missing my shots because I was overcompensating for zero recoil. It was bizarre, but that was just as broken as any weapon there ever had been,
But to, Raven's credit, they've gotten on top of it. And I think as of kind of the date of this recording, I feel like things are fairly balanced, though the Bren certainly, when leveled up, does do a walloping amount of damage, but not to the point where I think the game's broken or unplayable and you're at a massive, disadvantage without that.
Well, I think that, I don't think that the game is broken. This ain't like, broken metas of the past. I wouldn't throw the Bren in there. I think that they're going to nerf it. I think they're going to bring up the recoil a hair and maybe the thing is, it's not like an insane amount of damage. It's not like, the MG42 where it's a really, it's a slug hitter, but it's not, it's actually kind of a good meta, I feel like, but they're going to nerf it for sure. It is just, I think, a hair too like easy to shred with,
Yeah, I agree. I do think, though, there's some good limitations that keep it from being too crazy. Like, I think even the ammo capacity is fairly low. But again, I don't have mine leveled up. I'm just speaking from picking them up off of other players and off the ground loot. But that said, let's dive into the current meta. Let's talk about it. Here's kind of my list I've put together. You feel free to see if you agree or disagree, but it seems like in terms of the Vanguard meta, which I would say probably sitting at the top, especially in terms of LMGs and ARs, is we have the Bren.
No question. No question.
The STG, the Cooper Carbine, and then for the bar, also, I've been hearing very, very good things about the bar. And then in terms of SMGs, obviously the MP40, and I think the PPSH is still very, very viable.
Yeah, I think, if you rank them, Bren is number one. People love the Cooper Carbine, but I think they like the Cooper Carbine mostly as a short-range AR. And the bar, I think what's keeping the bar from like elite status is its obviously slow fire rate. And it has a super, super slow ADS. I'm pretty sure no matter what you do with it, maybe I'm wrong there, but every custom bar that I've used still has a very, very slow ADS and a very slow fire rate. So for those amateurs out there that don't hit a lot of your shots, you want to use a higher fire rate because then more bullets are getting on your enemy, even if you're spraying around all over the place. The bar is the opposite of that. It's it's like do, very slow. Bar, I've gotten some of the top leveled bars off of dead players and used them. I suck with them because you know me, I don't hit all my shots all the time. So I think the Bren's at the top of that list for like a LMG AR situation. I think the bar's at the bottom. And I think the Cooper Carbine and I would go Bren number 1, Carbine number 2, STG number 3, bar number 4. Then obviously that MP40. I feel like the STG is just a competent weapon. I don't think it's anything spectacular. It's just a competent AR.
Well, I personally have kind of made my decision on what I'm chasing, what I'm leveling up for this current meta, and I'm actually kind of in love with the STG, especially as I'm getting mine leveled up. I'm really happy with it, like very low recoil and very, very good bullet velocity, so you're able to kind of hit from afar, even though I only think I have like a 4x scope on it. A lot of options there too, and obviously having it, is like come to these standards, you have a few blueprints to play around with. So I don't think even when I do unlock the Bren, I'm going to be chasing that as my main goal. I'm just trying to get my STG all the way up at this point, and then obviously pairing it with the MP40. How about you though? You're set on the Bren there for your primary?
Well, I have an STG MP40 loadout. That is my current overkill loadout. And the STG, mine's pretty leveled up. I think I'm at like level 35. It's not fully where it needs to be. It does still have a little bit of a recoil. I think I set that loadout yesterday or the day before, so I'm still playing around with that. It's funny that you like the STG. I really think the STG is kind of the Vanguard equivalent of of the M13 or a Kilo or something like that. It's a very middle of the road AR that, is very user friendly. I think that is. And that makes sense that you're into that because that's you love the M13. I probably, once I unlock the Bren, going to stick with the Bren because I'm pretty sure this is a question actually maybe you know the answer to. So I haven't unlocked the Bren on my battle pass yet, right? I haven't unlocked it, but I've been using it a lot. I'm wondering if the XP on that weapon, the leveling of that weapon carries over even though I haven't unlocked it yet, or only do you start leveling it once it's unlocked?
I'm fairly certain that you're leveling up the weapon, although not unlocked. Once you have it, you will have that XP acquired for it. That those attachments that came along with that leveling up. I believe so.
Okay, because if that's the case, then I will probably stick with the Bren until there is a nerf, because I've used it quite a bit. And the ground loot Brens are actually pretty great ground loot LMGs. If you get a blue, or even sometimes a green. I mean, it's an iron sight on the green, but on the blue, you have a little bit of you have a nice little sight on it. I've used those all the time. That's how I get a majority of my kills, honestly, is a ground loot Bren. So I think that I have that pretty leveled up. I'm probably going to chase that Bren until it's nerfed.
All right. Well, I gotta say a quote that stood out to me while I was playing you this week is you said, "It feels so good to be running around with an LMG." And I know from the beginning, those listeners, especially that have been with us from the beginning, the Cowboys' original love was the PKM. Is an LMG kind of guy. Do you kind of want to wax on that a little bit, give more, insight into why that feels so good for you?
I just hate reloading, and I love a nice big old mag. And LMGs typically have the largest mags of the litter. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, and I kind of like the ground loot. I think it's the MG82s. Where,
Yeah, it's got 125 rounds in that chamber.
And it spits them out quick. And I'm like, with these buildings with the thin walls, the FMJ wall banging's more on the menu, so I have no problem. Like, my teammates are like, somebody's in there. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna fucking unload this whole goddamn clip over there. I'll give you some cover, baby. Move closer.
Yeah, it's like, give me an MG42, 125 round mag, and a PP with 72 in the mag. I'm a happy boy.
Bullet hosing it up. All right, so that's really, I think, in agreement for the meta in terms of Vanguard. In terms of Black Ops, still certainly viable. The C58, I'd say, is top tier, and I know JGod, it seemed, echoed this, is that the C58 prior to the EM2 nerf was very viable too, but now that the EM2 has been nerfed, like, the C58 was untouched, so it's kind of still sitting there at the top. Very good, and also the OTS-9, still savage SMG in the Warzone. And then finally, in terms of Modern Warfare, I feel like it's really kind of just the Car 98, though. I've been seeing a ton of kilos making their way back to the Warzone.
What do you think they're going to do in regards to weapons of past? I mean, do you think it's only a matter of time before they phase out and only have Vanguard guns? Do you think that that's ultimately going to happen?
I don't. However, I don't know, but I know what's certainly been kind of 99.9% confirmed due to leaks and other things going on is that the next, as in the next one in 2022 to release standalone Call of Duty game is going to be another Modern Warfare game. So I have to imagine when that comes, they'll go ahead, they'll wipe the old Modern Warfare guns off the slate. At that point, the Black Ops guns will be the oldest ones in the Warzone. We'll have Vanguard, and then there'll be a new round of Modern Warfare weapons. Again, this is my theory here, and then kind of what's old will be new again, and we'll kind of cycle it, honestly, in a way like that, perhaps.
Yeah. And I guess because they've sold so many skins for those weapons, they're not going to take them away. I guess that all plays into it. That'd be pretty lame. But, I mean, maybe they keep marginalizing those weapons in making the game modes fewer and fewer far between. Like right now, you have to make a very active decision to play in a game mode that uses the Modern Warfare and Black Ops weapons. Or you go Vanguard, It's one or the other kind of. You have to make that decision. And I wonder if they keep, they just slowly based that decision over us until we're nice and ripe and baked and ready to eat. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. Nice and crispy. And I'm with you. I think, too, also with that in mind is like if they do ultimately, release a new batch of Modern Warfare weapons and they replace the old, like they need to make a conscious effort to avoid this weird, doubling up. So maybe in the new Modern Warfare, they don't have a Car 98. They don't have like these other guns that already fucking exist. Like, just leave now the Vanguard as the only Car 98 moving forward and just stick with a Modern Warfare guns. Like, only, what was it, the HDR and the AX50, like, those are the snipers. Or maybe, like, there's a quick, marksman rifle variety of that nature. I hope, because, again, like, obviously, Warzone's kind of come together like organically here, but now that they have these 3 games existing, I'd hope they would have more of kind of a mindset about where they want to go and how to kind of streamline some of this. But that is certainly yet to see and many months away for the time being.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think we hold as much brass amongst the executives as we used to, but hopefully they're still listening.
Not as of yet, but with every new listener and subscriber on here, we got to be growing in our collective voices here. But that's...
Speaking of growing, I'm going to interrupt this deep discussion right now just to point something out. And this is some shameless self-promotion. If you like the podcast, please give us a like, a subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere that you get your podcast. It goes a really long way for us. We know that we have far more listeners to this podcast than we do on subscribers on our YouTube. If we could make this a daily job, we would do it in a second. And it all starts with you smashing that subscribe button. So let's get back to the regular scheduled content.
That's right. And Spotify just this week released the ability to review podcasts. So please give us a 5-star rating out there. That really helps us as well.
Yeah, actually, that's huge.
So yes,
That would be really great.
in terms of the meta, I think we're all on the same page. Unfortunately, due to the stupid fucking 10 attachment bullshit, I'm not going to go through and list like recommended builds for these guns we've just touched on, the Bren, the STG and the MP40. You're going to have to go ahead, check out JGod, check out True Game Data, or check out Warzone Ranked, see kind of what people are running. There is a lot of different ways to kind of skin this cat and build your loadouts, and I know there's no definitive answers out there, but seem to be on the same page. So let's now move on to the events of the past week, which I believe are now coming to a close as the holiday has passed, but there was a big like Krampus Christmas event in the Warzone. Do you want to tee that up for the listeners who maybe, didn't have a chance to be a part of it?
Yeah. So basically what the Krampus Christmas event was, if you are familiar with what Krampus is, I can't even give you the backstory on Krampus. I know that it was a kind of like a B Hollywood film that was made a couple years ago called Krampus, and it was like a it was a horror film. Definitely B-level, definitely wasn't super popular, but I'm pretty sure it had like a little bit of a cult following. But Krampus is like this evil fucker that terrorizes people on Christmas. And basically, and I kind of like the concept of this. I do like it when they do these holiday events because I found myself, well, we'll talk about what the gameplay, what it does to gameplay after this. But basically they set up, it's either 4 or 5, I want to say 5 Christmas trees across Caldera in random places, and these Christmas trees have 4 regenerative boxes around them. So you basically drop on the Christmas tree, and it's almost like doing a recon where it shoots a giant spotlight up into the middle of the sky. Then there's like a timer that's going by, and there's 3 different tiers. When you get there, all of the boxes kind of become available to open, and they're full of shit. You get your armor satchels, there's airstrikes, there's, pretty decent weapons too, pretty good ground loot weapons. They're not dropping shit weapons out of them. They're pretty, rare weapons that come out of these boxes. So there's tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. You do this, it probably takes about 30 seconds or so, 10 seconds per tier to get all the boxes open. And then what happens is you get all this shit, and then eventually, and I haven't confirmed this or not. Some people have told me one thing, some people have told me another. Krampus will hunt your squad. This motherfucker who looks kind of like basically if like an elk and a Sasquatch had a baby.
He's like a Yeti.
A Yeti. It's like a bipedal animal that is furry but kind of has like an elk's face. It's really bizarre. I don't know. It's kind of like a Yeti. I guess a Yeti's a good description of it. But basically this and that's Krampus. That is Krampus. Krampus at some point typically comes after your squad throughout the duration of one of these large map battles. And this is a whole nother thing too, is that when they first introduced this event and your squad was getting hunted by getting hunted? How do you say that? Your squad was hunted by Krampus. Krampus was a bitch to kill. He was like, in the beginning, very, very difficult to take down. He was wiping squads, downing people. But over the week or so, or maybe even a few days of the Krampus event going live, they definitely nerfed Krampus to where he was manageable and you could hang out and kill him. The problem is with Krampus on the map is as soon as you start getting in a fight with Krampus, he takes a shit ton of ammunition. Usually he drops an munitions box once you defeat him, but this lends itself to third parties coming in and fucking up your game, and that happened to us all the time over the last 2 weeks. Am I right? I feel like that was a huge kind of like storyline, was getting third partied when Krampus would come fuck you.
Yeah, definitely had many shares of third partying going on with this Krampus bastard, as the cowboy just teed up. He's an NPC, non-player, character. He targets one guy on your squad. He also like throws these snowballs at you, which just kind of like hurt you a little, but they mostly kind of fuck up the periphery of your vision. And as the first time he hunted me, like it was a visceral, frightening experience. I should have clipped it. I was screaming, running for my life as he was chasing me, but now since been nerfed, much more manageable. It is
kind of scary. He comes at you, if you don't know where he is and you don't identify him early on, and he's running up on you, it's pretty scary.
And then he teleports, and his sound effects were real scary. And now as Cowboy said, much more manageable, much more kind of a nuisance. And the recommendation I have is kind of what will happen is he runs at you, you'll put shots into him, but don't continually shoot him. Like he'll kind of at one point stop moving, and at that point you can wait, and then he will teleport, and he kind of does a teleport 2 or 3 times, and at which point he's defeated. He will only hunt your squad once per game, so it's kind of almost best if you get him early to just get him out of the way. But yeah, that's really been the gist of the Christmas event. However, going along with it, every single day they had different kind of weird stuff going on in the Warzone. Like Christmas Day, they doubled the price of UAVs and halved the price of airstrikes. So you had to spend $12,000 for a UAV on Christmas Day. The day prior, everyone dropped in with a gas mask. I'm not sure what Sunday, this date of recording, has been, but it's kind of, they were spicing things up there. Some were hits, some were misses.
Yeah, they were mixing it up, which I kind of found fun and interesting. Also, the other part of the whole holiday shenanigan was the Elves, which took me a really long time to understand what was going on with the Elves, because I would hear them often, but they're really hard to see. Basically, if you hear this like really disturbing giggling, it sounds like a child, like a man-child. Well, it's an elf, I guess. An elf's giggling. They're somewhere in your near vicinity, gets louder and louder and louder until you're right next to it. And the elf is hiding near you, and then one bullet kills the elf, and then there's another elf that respawns near you, and then basically you do that 3 times, kill the elves. They give you some shit. You get some loot, which is nice. The problem is that the elves are hard to find. They did a good job hiding them. Like I was looking for these elves at times, and I could not find some of these fucking elves.
I agree, and they're easy to miss. Even like, you're scanning around, all of a sudden it's like, my advice is look in weird spots. Like they'll be wedged in these weird little crannies. And as you touched on, once you kill one though, it kind of starts like a timer to where you got to start finding these other fuckers. And if you don't, then you get this weird stun effect where you kind of get punished for not finding them in time.
Yeah, imagine, this didn't happen to us, but imagine if you had, had that stun effect happen when a team pushes you inside of a building. They could be nuisances,
Those goddamn little elves. But yeah, so, credit to them giving us a limited time event here right in the early stages of Vanguard and Caldera and Warzone The Pacific. I'd say probably more successful than the most recent Halloween event. So cheers to that. Had some fun. I'm not sure how long Krampus is sticking around. I know a lot of the people in the community, though, are a bit upset he's coming every single match, but it is what it is. I do think the nerf certainly helped make him a little bit more tolerable. But that's it for kind of the big items, the big things we didn't touch on last week or dive into. Although one final thing I wanted to mention was, when I fired up Warzone The Pacific for the first time, they locked me into that cutscene, but I gotta say, like, the cinematic storyline that they're starting off with is in such an incredibly stronger place than all of what we've been used to, especially for Black Ops and Stitch. Like, they have like a fucking voiceover narration now where I can actually follow what's going on. It's coherent. I don't know, man.
This makes me think they have been listening to the Warzone Amateur Hour, because this is the exact shit we've been preaching about, literally for a year now.
Yeah, so maybe they finally invested in some, good writer's room. They decided, hey, let's actually make a fucking story that has a beginning, middle, and an end that people can track. But I kind of know what's going on, and I'm kind of eager to see, like, what's the next chapter going to hold.
Yeah, when do they typically release content in this variety where they're giving tidbits of the storyline? How often does that happen? Does that typically precede a season update? I wonder then if that leads to the next question. When is going to be the next season of Caldera? I know we're kind of rushing the gun here, but I'm just curious. When do we get more of this?
I believe each of these cinematics comes when they kind of refresh, the season. So typically it's like a season launches and then they'll do like a mid-season, or they were calling them reloaded. I know last during Black Ops. So I'd say 1 or 2 per season. I'm not sure. I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks were like the halfway point for seasons last time. So I think we're 2 or 3 weeks into Vanguard Season 1 on Warzone The Pacific, so maybe 2 or 3 weeks away from that mid-season update and maybe a new chapter in this cinematic story.
Gotcha. Right on. So we got a little bit of time.
So we got a little bit of time, and we've got a little bit of time on this week's podcast for one final topic, and that's an email we received from not only a listener, but a Patreon supporter of us. So, high on the echelon of people that we admire and cherish in our community. So thank you.
And are grateful for.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we love this person, and that's Trim Turnip in the Warzone. Reached out, and he said, after playing Caldera for a while now, I can comfortably say that PC players with the high FOV have a significant advantage on this map.
Amen.
The percentage of fights I get into on Caldera that take place in buildings is markedly lower than on Verdansk, which we talked about this episode. Nearly all of the mid to late game fights take place in the open while teams are traversing the map positionally. This means that simply spotting enemies by chance among the trees and bushes leads to winning gunfights. So higher FOVs allow for more than double the chance of spotting someone. And he says, all of this also means that mid to long range fights are what you'll find yourself in more often in the early game drop. As a result, PC players have always had an advantage in mid to long range battles, and it was fine in Verdansk because it was saturated with buildings and flat surfaces that, I don't know what LOS is, was difficult to make. Line of sight was difficult to maintain. You could run like a 10-inch cowgirl and hide easier, but now the line of sight almost has no limit due to elevation of the peak, which is where most endgames take place. Again, if we console and controller players were able to position ourselves to have fights indoors, we could use aim assist to counter. So he basically is just saying he made his case. This is why he thinks an FOV slider is imperative for Caldera.
I was following along. Did he call me the 10-inch cowgirl halfway through that? It really shattered me. Is that what he said?
I think he was just using it as like a metaphorical device about, like, instead of a schoolgirl, it's like a 10-inch cowgirl, like a... Not you yourself, but an iteration of you.
Like if I were, like, basically, okay, I understand. It wasn't an attack at me.
If you were the 10-inch schoolboy, he'd be like, you could run like a 10-inch schoolgirl.
Okay. So it was,
assume.
okay, okay. We're walking a fine line there, but I'll be the bigger person. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's making a case for the FOV not being modifiable by us console players to be totally fucking destructive to our gameplay, and I totally agree.
I'm with him so much, especially late game when you're watching open spaces. It's like you have to pivot left and right. It'd be so nice to be able to scan like horizon to horizon, or left, like end of the field on the left to the right. And something, I know we harped on the fact that we kind of were promised an FOV slider and it never came, but that goes hand in hand with, I know for a fact, they said to us like 6 months ago that they were working on a next-gen version of Warzone. And obviously, I know when that comes, that's where the FOV slider will be, but we haven't heard a fucking peep since Caldera's come out. And so we're still running on console. You're still running, if you're on PlayStation, the PS4 version, and if you're on Xbox, like the Xbox, whatever, Series X version. So we're still like limited here, man. Give us a fucking bone.
Total bullshit. I think, I don't want to sound dramatic, but this is reality, so I'm going to say it. There have been times that I feel everyone's going to laugh at me and think I'm such a loser, but I have felt, claustrophobic a little bit playing in Caldera. I swear, I feel like I need more space, like I'm inside of like a hole. You know what I mean? I sometimes feel that way, and I really think it's because when I start actually thinking about my FOV and it being so limited, it's like psyching me out when I'm playing, especially if I know someone is around me and I'm like, I kind of hear something, but I don't know where they are. And I'm inside a house maybe, and I'm trying to look out like two windows at the same time, but I don't quite have the range to do it. I get this like kind of terrifying sense that I'm getting trapped, and it's driving me fucking crazy.
Interesting. I don't know if what I felt is claustrophobic, but I've certainly, and I know it's due to the FOV, it's like a weird paranoia, anxiety that there's always somebody behind me or just outside of my view, and I can never like feel comfortable engaging with someone in a distance. I'm always like scanning left, checking behind me, which, you know, maybe that's on purpose, but I do feel like that's certainly mitigated way less with the PC players that have the wide FOV. Is like where the fuck are they? Oh, there's another team coming to my left, to my right, because it's like I'm always kind of vulnerable from those positions. So that's kind of where I'm at.
So you don't feel what I feel, basically. It's not as visceral for you as it is for me being trapped.
I don't think so, unless Krampus is hunting me down in a tight space.
Okay, well, it's whatever. I agree with Trim Turnip, basically, is what I'm getting at.
All right, and so do I, and that is going to do it for us this week on the Warzone Amateur Hour podcast. As always, thank you all so much for dropping in with us. We've hit the ground running here in the new world, the new year on the Warzone Amateur Hour, in the new world of Vanguard and the Pacific. As the Cowboy said earlier on, please, 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 if you haven't already, subscribe to us, follow us, whatever the terminology is, make it happen on YouTube, wherever you get this podcast, or even where you don't get it. Just hit that little button, like our stuff, comment our stuff, share our stuff. That's the best way to help us grow. Leave us a review, and keep sending these emails and thoughts, man. We love engaging with all of y'all.
Yeah, also, I will say, I think on the Patreon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the episode a day early. Because we record, we'll pull the curtain back for you. We'll tell you how it works. We record right now, and I'm going to throw it up as soon as we're done editing this. I'll put it on the Patreon for those patrons early a day, and then it obviously gets distributed out to all the different platforms tomorrow. So I think I'm going to throw it up after that. Little perk up there for the Patreon. So thank you for all the patrons. We really appreciate it, as Tron said.
Yeah, that's right. Spicing it up, slowly mixing in some sweeteners there. So thank you all so much for dropping in with us. We will talk to you next week. And until then,
good luck in the gulag.